"We want this one, Daddy," the cowboy's twin girls insisted while the town whispered. The widow was too wide to wed. Long before those words were ever shouted on a platform, Nora Ashford stood in her parents' kitchen, clutching a worn travel bag, while her father's voice cut through her like a knife. "You're not staying here." "Dad, please," she whispered. "I can work. I can help. I'll do anything." Her mother's voice, sharp as broken glass, sliced straight through her. "You've been nothing but a burden since the day you were born. We married you off at 17, thinking you'd finally become someone else's problem, and now you're back." Nora's throat tightened. "Thomas died of fever. I didn't." "It doesn't matter what killed him," her father interrupted. "What matters is what people say. They say you worked him to death. They say your weight broke his back. They say God punished him for marrying a woman like you." Her mother folded her arms. "The neighbors mock us. The church whispers. We can't keep you here." She shoved a train ticket into Nora's shaking hands. "There's a mail-order bride car heading out to Ridgeway territory. You're going with them." "But I'm not a bride," Nora murmured, barely audible. "Nobody wants you," her mother snapped. "So you'll find work. A kitchen, a boarding house, anything, but you are not staying here." Her father grabbed her arm, dragging her toward the door. "The train leaves in an hour. Don't come back." The door slammed behind her. Nora stood alone in the cold dawn, tears streaming down her face. Pushed out. Again. At the station, 3 young women in bright dresses laughed near the platform. The mail-order brides, pretty, hopeful, looked Nora up and down and whispered, "Who's she?" "She doesn't look like a bride. Maybe she's going as cattle." Laughter burst from them. Nora clutched her bag tighter, eyes fixed on the ground. The station master shouted, "All brides boarding for Ridgeway territory." Nora stepped toward the train. A man's voice boomed from the crowd. "Wait, who let her on? She'll sink the whole train." More laughter rippled around her. Her face burned, but she climbed aboard anyway and slipped into a seat in the back corner, as far from the other women as she could get. As the train pulled away, she stared out at the town she would never see again. She was 23, a widow, unwanted, and completely alone. Hours later, the train screeched into Ridgeway Station. The platform was lined with ranchers and townsfolk, all eager to see the brides arrive. The 3 young women stepped down first, greeted with smiles and tipped hats. Then Nora descended. The crowd fell, abruptly silent. "Who's that?" a rancher muttered. "She's not on the list," another said. The station master frowned at his clipboard. "We were expecting 3 brides, not 4. Nora's voice barely rose above the wind. "I'm not a bride. I'm traveling on to my sister's in Silver Pine. I just needed to get off here to change trains." A woman's voice, dripping mockery, sliced through the hush. "Or you were hoping some desperate fool would be dumb enough to take you." Laughter rolled through the crowd. "Look at her size. She's too wide to marry." Someone began to chant, soft and cruel. "Too wide to marry. Too wide to marry." Others joined in. Nora's hands trembled. She took a step back toward the train, wishing she could simply vanish. Then 2 small voices cut through the noise. "We want this one, Daddy." Every head turned. 2 little girls, identical twins in bright blue dresses, broke free from the crowd and ran straight past the pretty brides. They stopped in front of Nora, staring up at her with solemn, wide eyes. "She's perfect," the first girl said. "She looks like the mom in our storybook." The second girl slipped her small hand into Nora's. "Please, Daddy, we want her." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The station master laughed nervously. "Girls, she isn't one of the brides. She's just—" "We want this one," the first girl shouted louder. From the back of the crowd, a tall figure stepped forward. The man was broad-shouldered and rough, his face shadowed by the brim of his hat. His boots thudded on the wooden platform with slow, deliberate steps. People moved aside as he walked until he stopped in front of Nora and looked her over. His expression was unreadable. Not cruel, not kind, only assessing. "Do you need somewhere to stay?" His voice was low and rough. Nora stammered, "No, I was going to—" "Simple question," he cut in. "Do you need a place or not?" She swallowed. Yes, she whispered. I do. Then you'll come with us. The station master sputtered. Caleb, you can't be serious. The man, Caleb Thorne, never took his eyes off Nora. My girls made their choice. He turned and walked toward a wagon waiting at the edge of the platform. The twins gripped Nora's hands and pulled her along. Behind them, the crowd exploded in whispers. He's taking her? Those girls have lost their minds. She'll eat him out of house and home. Nora stumbled after them, heart pounding, unable to grasp what had just happened. The town had mocked her, dismissed her, but two small girls had chosen her, and their father had let them. The wagon rattled over rough ground, its wheels squeaking with every turn. Dust rose behind them in soft clouds, and the late afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the prairie. The twins sat on either side of Nora, their small bodies pressed close, their chatter filling the silence like birdsong. What's your name? The first girl asked, tilting her head. Nora, she replied quietly. I'm Lily, the girl said with a bright smile. And this is Rose. We're twins. I can see that, Nora said, a faint smile tugging at her lips despite everything. Rose scooted closer, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Do you like horses? I suppose I do. Good, Lily announced with serious conviction, because Daddy has lots of horses and cows and chickens, and sometimes the chickens are mean, but Daddy says they're just protecting their eggs. Nora glanced toward the front of the wagon. Caleb sat straight-backed, reins loose in his hands, eyes fixed on the road ahead. He hadn't said a word since they'd left the station. His silence felt heavy, not cruel, but impenetrable, like a wall she couldn't see over. Rose tugged at Nora's sleeve. Can you braid hair? I can, Nora said. Mom used to braid our hair, Lily said softly, but now she's gone. Nora's chest tightened. I'm sorry. Rose looked up with solemn innocence. It's okay. Daddy says she's with the angels, but we still miss her. I'm sure you do, Nora whispered. The wagon hit a rut, jolting them. Nora grabbed the side to steady herself, and Caleb's voice cut through the air for the first time since they'd left town. Hold on back there. His tone was flat and practical, not unkind, but not warm either. Nora swallowed and nodded, though he couldn't see her. The ranch came into view as the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was larger than Nora expected, a solid house with a wide porch, a barn listing slightly to one side, fences stretching into the distance, some leaning, some broken. Laundry hung limp on a line, half dry and forgotten. The vegetable garden was choked with weeds. It was a place that had once been carefully tended but wasn't anymore. Caleb drew the wagon to a stop near the house and climbed down without a word. The twins scrambled after him, tugging Nora along. He strode up onto the porch, opened the door, and stepped inside. Nora hesitated on the threshold, unsure. Come on, Lily urged, pulling her hand. Inside, the house was dark and quiet. Dust floated in the thin beams of light that slipped through the windows. Dishes were stacked in the sink. A shirt lay draped over the back of a chair. The floor had been swept, but only just. Caleb nodded toward a narrow hallway. Room down there, second door. You can stay there. Nora dipped her head. Thank you. He didn't answer, just turned and walked toward the kitchen, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. Rose tugged at Nora's skirt. Come see our room. They led her down the hallway, chattering excitedly, their bright voices a sharp contrast to the heaviness hanging in the house. Their bedroom was small but neat, two narrow beds with quilts that had seen better days, a wooden doll resting on one pillow, its painted face faded, a cracked mirror hanging crookedly on the wall. This is where we sleep, Lily said proudly. It's very nice, Nora answered softly. Rose scrambled onto her bed and patted the space beside her. Will you sit with us? Nora sat, and the girls snuggled against her, one on each side. Tell us a story, Lily begged. I don't know many stories, Nora admitted. That's okay, Rose said. Just make one up. So Nora did. She told them about a girl who lived in a valley where flowers grew taller than trees and where every star in the sky had a name. The twins listened with wide eyes until their breathing slowed and their heads grew heavy against her arms. When Nora finally looked up, she froze. Caleb stood in the doorway, watching in silence. Their eyes met for a brief moment. His expression didn't change, but something flickered there, something she couldn't name. Then he turned and walked away. The next morning, Nora woke before dawn. Sleep had never been her friend. Her mind was too loud, her body too restless. She dressed quietly and stepped out into the hallway. The house was still. In the kitchen, her eyes took in the crusted dishes, the cold stove, the mending basket untouched in the corner. She couldn't just sit. She never could. So she lit the stove, filled the sink with water, and began to scrub. By the time the sun crept over the horizon, the dishes were clean, the table wiped, the floor swept. The twins appeared in the doorway, rubbing their eyes. "You're awake," Lily said, surprised. "I am," Nora answered with a smile. "Are you making breakfast?" Rose asked hopefully. "If I may." Nora found flour, eggs, a little bacon. She cooked while the girls sat at the table, legs swinging, watching her with bright curiosity. When Caleb came in from the barn, he stopped in the doorway. His gaze moved over the clean kitchen, the food on the table, his daughters already eating from full plates. "You didn't have to do this," he said. "I know," Nora replied quietly, "but I wanted to." He didn't respond. He just sat down, served himself, and ate in silence. Nora noticed. He didn't push the food away. He didn't tell her to stop. He didn't say she was a guest and guests didn't work. He simply ate. When he finished, he stood, set his hat back on, and paused at the door. "If you're planning on staying," he said without looking at her, "you'll need boots. Yours won't last a week out here." Then he stepped outside. Nora stood there with a rag in her hands, her heart beating a little faster. It wasn't kindness, not exactly, but it wasn't cruelty either. And for Nora Ashford, that was more than she'd had in a very long time. Days blurred one into another, measured in chores and sweat, and the slow, steady rhythm of ranch life. Nora worked from sunup to sundown. She scrubbed floors until her knees ached, carried water from the well until her shoulders burned, mended fences, yanked weeds from the garden, kneaded dough until her hands throbbed. She didn't ask for rest, didn't complain, didn't expect praise. Work was the only language she knew, the only way she had ever been allowed to prove her worth. Caleb watched, not openly, not obviously, but she felt his eyes on her when she carried laundry to the line, when she hauled feed to the horses, when she bent over the garden with dirt under her nails and sweat on her brow. He didn't talk much, but she could tell when he'd noticed a task was done. He left tools where she could reach them. One morning she opened her door to find a pair of worn but sturdy boots waiting for her, no word attached. The twins, however, filled every silence. They followed her everywhere, chattering like sparrows, asking endless questions, helping in their clumsy, earnest way. One afternoon, Nora knelt in the garden, pulling up stubborn weeds. Lily sat beside her, holding a basket. "Why do weeds grow?" Lily asked. "Because they're stubborn," Nora said, tugging out a particularly thick root. "They don't care whether they're wanted or not. They just grow." Rose, perched on Nora's other side, frowned. "That's sad." "Why is it sad?" Nora asked. "Because nobody wants them," Rose said. "They're just trying to live." Nora's hands stilled in the dirt. She looked at the girl, her chest tightening. "You're right," she said softly. "They are." Lily edged closer. "Do you think weeds know they're weeds?" Nora gave a faint smile. "I don't know. Maybe they think they're flowers." "Then we should let them stay," Rose declared firmly. "Maybe some of them," Nora agreed. "But not all, or there won't be room for the vegetables." Lily nodded solemnly. "That makes sense." From the barn, Caleb's voice carried across the yard. "Girls, let her work." "We're helping," Lily shouted back. There was a pause. Then his reply came softer, almost amused. "I'm sure you are. One evening, Nora was in the kitchen, kneading bread. The air smelled of yeast and flour. Caleb stepped in, bringing with him the scent of leather, dust, and horses. He poured himself water from the pitcher, drank, and set the cup on the table. "You don't have to do all this," he said. Nora didn't look up. "I know." "Then why do you?" She pressed her palms into the dough, folding it over and over. "Because I need to." "Need to what?" "Earn my place." Caleb was silent for a long moment. Then he pulled out a chair and sat down. "You already have a place." Nora's hand stopped. She looked up, startled. His expression was as unreadable as ever, but his eyes weren't cold. They were steady, sure. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "You're not a servant here." "Then what am I?" she asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. He just studied her, his jaw working as if the words were caught somewhere deep. "You're someone my daughters chose," he said at last, "and they don't choose badly." Nora's throat tightened. She blinked quickly and turned back to the dough. "Thank you," she whispered. Caleb stood, his chair scraping the floor. He walked toward the door, then paused. "My wife," he said, his voice low, "died 2 years ago. Fever took her fast. I couldn't save her." Nora's breath caught. "The girls don't remember much," he went on. "Just pieces. Her voice, her smell, the way she braided their hair." He looked at Nora, and for the first time she saw a crack in his armor. "They haven't smiled like this since she died," he said. "Not until you came." Nora's eyes stung. "I'm not trying to replace her." "I know," Caleb said, "but you're giving them something I couldn't, and for that, I'm grateful." He turned and stepped out before she could answer. Nora stood there with flour on her hands and her heart pounding, and for the first time since Thomas died, she didn't feel like a burden. She felt like she mattered. A week later, the sky turned dark and heavy. Caleb stood on the porch, eyes fixed on the horizon. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of rain and something sharper, something dangerous. "Storm's coming," he said. Nora stepped beside him, wiping her hands on her apron. "A bad one?" "Could be." The twins dashed onto the porch, excitement lighting their faces. "Can we watch the lightning, Daddy?" "No," Caleb said firmly. "You'll stay inside. Both of you, inside now." His tone left no room for argument. They obeyed reluctantly, shuffling back into the house. He looked at Nora. "You should stay in too." "What about the cattle?" she asked. "I'll handle them." "You can't do it alone." His jaw tightened. "I've done it before." "Not tonight," Nora said, her voice steady. "Tonight you have help." He stared at her, something shifting in his eyes. Then he nodded once. "Get a coat. It's going to be rough." The storm hit like a fist. Rain hammered down in sheets, cold and merciless. The wind howled, snatching at clothes, hair, and breath. Caleb and Nora ran toward the pasture, where the herd was already panicking, eyes rolling white, hooves churning mud. "They'll stampede if we don't settle them," Caleb shouted over the wind. Nora didn't hesitate. She ran straight toward the nearest cow, arms raised, voice low and steady. "Easy now. Easy. You're all right." The cow snorted and shifted, but didn't bolt. Caleb glanced at her, astonished, then moved to the next animal. Together they worked, guiding, calming, driving the herd toward the shelter of the barn. Thunder crashed overhead. Lightning split the sky, and then a scream tore through the roar. Nora's head snapped around. Lily and Rose stood at the edge of the pasture, soaked to the skin, eyes huge with fear, frozen in place. "What are you doing out here?" Caleb roared. "We wanted to help," Lily sobbed. A cow broke away, charging straight toward the girls. Nora didn't think. She ran. She threw herself between the animal and the twins, arms outstretched, voice sharp and fierce. "No! Stop! Stop!" The cow skidded, hooves sliding in the slick mud, and veered aside at the last second. Nora collapsed to her knees as the twins crashed into her, sobbing. Caleb was there a heartbeat later, pulling all three of them into his arms. "You could have died," he said, his voice shaking. Nora looked up at him, rain streaming down her face. "So could you," she replied. For a long moment, they knelt there in the mud, the storm raging around them, and something between them shifted. Neither of them could name it yet, but it was real. The storm passed, leaving the land washed clean and the air sharp with cold. By morning, both twins were pale and coughing, worn thin by cold and terror. Nora moved between their beds like a shadow, changing damp cloths, stirring broth, her eyes red from lack of sleep. Caleb stood in the doorway, silent. He had offered to help, but she had only shaken her head. "They just need someone to keep watch," she had whispered. For 2 long days she barely left their side. When Lily's small hand groped for hers, Nora took it without hesitation. "Rest now," she murmured. Lily blinked sleepily. "You'll stay here, right?" "I will," Nora said. "All night." Beside her, Rose stirred. "Do moms do that?" she asked drowsily. "Stay all night?" Nora's throat caught. "The good ones try," she answered. Rose gave a faint smile and drifted back to sleep. The fire burned low as the fever finally broke. Nora slumped in the chair between the beds, exhaustion softening every line of her face. Caleb watched from the doorway, arms folded, lamplight flickering over him. He said nothing, just watched as she brushed hair from the girls' foreheads, her movements gentle and sure. Outside, the wind had turned calm again. Inside, the only sound was the slow, steady breathing of the twins. In that quiet, something unspoken settled between them, trust and the quiet beginning of belonging. The days that followed were different. Caleb no longer just watched. He worked at her side, talked with her, asked questions. "Where'd you learn to handle cattle like that?" he asked one afternoon as they repaired a fence together. "My husband had a small farm," Nora said. "I helped with everything. He didn't give me much choice." Caleb studied her. "You didn't love him." It wasn't a question. Nora drove a nail into the post, her hands steady. "No, I didn't, but I tried to be a good wife." "I'm sure you were." He didn't think so. Caleb stopped working and turned toward her fully. Then he was a fool. Nora looked at him, startled. His face was serious, his eyes steady. "You're one of the strongest people I've ever met," he said. "Anyone who couldn't see that didn't deserve you." Her chest tightened, and she looked away, blinking fast. "Thank you," she whispered. Caleb reached out, his hand brushing hers for just a moment. Then he went back to the fence and picked up his hammer. One afternoon, the twins begged Nora to let them help with the biscuits. She finally gave in, tying aprons that were far too big around their waists and rolling up their sleeves. Lily poured flour into the bowl with great ceremony. Too much, too quickly. A white cloud exploded upward, covering everything. Nora gasped, blinking through the haze. Her hair and dress turned ghostly pale. For an instant, there was silence. Then the twins burst into laughter. "You look like a snow lady," Rose squealed, clapping. Nora tried to frown, but the smile broke through anyway. "You two are trouble." "Daddy!" Lily called toward the open doorway. "Come see what we did." Caleb appeared, drawn by the commotion. He took one look at Nora, flower in her hair, twins beaming at her, and started to laugh, deep and unrestrained. "You planning to bake?" he asked, "or start a snowstorm?" "Apparently both," Nora said, wiping her face with the back of her wrist. "You're next, Daddy," Lily declared. Before he could move, Rose flung a handful of flour straight at his chest. The twins froze. Silence. Then Nora's laughter broke free, bright and helpless. Caleb's eyebrow arched slowly. He stepped closer, eyes on her. "Is that so?" he said softly. He dipped his fingers into the bowl and drew a line of flour gently across her cheek. The twins squealed with delight. Nora's breath caught, because for a moment his hand lingered. His thumb brushed her skin, no longer teasing, but gentle and deliberate. Their eyes met through the drifting flower dust, and the noise around them seemed to fade away. Something shifted. The air between them grew still, tender, charged, and wordless. Then Rose shattered it, giggling. "Daddy likes Nora," Lily gasped. "Told you he did." Caleb coughed, straightening. "All right, that's enough mischief. Go wash up for supper." The twins ran off, still laughing, leaving a trail of white footprints. Nora turned back to the table, wiping her hands, trying not to smile. "You didn't have to join their nonsense," she said softly. Caleb's voice came from just behind her, low. "I didn't mind." She glanced over her shoulder, and there it was again, that quiet warmth in his eyes. No laughter now, something deeper. For a long second, neither of them moved. In that small, flour-dusted kitchen, with the smell of bread and the echo of laughter still in the air, something fragile and beautiful began to take root. Sunday morning arrived with golden light and the smell of fresh bread. Nora dressed carefully, smoothing her best dress, her hands trembling. Caleb had asked her to go to church with him and the girls. Not ordered, asked, and she had said yes. The twins were bright-eyed, their hair freshly braided, their dresses clean. "You look pretty, Nora," Lily said. "So do you," Nora replied, smiling. Caleb appeared in the doorway, hat in hand, expression unreadable. "Ready?" She nodded. The ride into town was quiet. The twins chatted. Caleb and Nora did not. The silence between them carried the weight of things felt, but not yet spoken. When they reached the church, heads turned. Whispers rose at once. "That's her, the one from the station." Still living with him without being married, shameful. Nora's stomach twisted, but she lifted her chin. Caleb walked at her side, steady and protective, his hand hovering near the small of her back without quite touching. The twins gripped her hands, oblivious to the stairs. They took a pew near the back. The sermon began, but Nora could hardly hear it. She felt judgment in every glance, every murmur. Midway through, the Reverend paused. "Mr. Thorne," he said, his voice echoing through the room, "there has been concern about the woman living under your roof." Silence fell. Caleb's jaw flexed. "Has there?" he said. "We're thinking of your reputation," the Reverend continued, "and of your daughters. Surely you see how this arrangement appears." "Appears to whom?" Caleb asked, his voice calm but sharp. "To the community," the Reverend replied. Caleb rose to his feet. The twins looked up at him, eyes wide. "Let me make something clear," he said, his voice like iron. "Nora Ashford saved my daughters' lives. She has worked on my ranch, cared for my girls when I couldn't, and hasn't asked for a thing in return." The Reverend shifted uneasily, but Caleb didn't stop. "This town mocked her the day she arrived," he went on, "called her names, made her feel small, but my daughters saw what none of you did. They saw her heart." He turned, his gaze softening as it landed on Nora, and so did I. Nora's breath caught, tears pricking her eyes. Caleb faced the congregation again. "If anyone here has a problem with her staying, they can bring it to me. But I won't let you shame her. Not anymore." Suddenly Lily stood up on the pew, her small voice ringing clear. "We want her to be our mom." Rose scrambled up beside her. "Forever!" The church went still. Then, from the front, an older woman rose. "I was wrong," she said quietly. "I judged her. I'm sorry." Another woman stood. "Me too." One by one, others rose, not all, but enough. The Reverend cleared his throat. "I suppose that settles it," he murmured. Caleb reached for Nora's hand. Together they walked out, the twins hurrying after them. Outside, under the wide blue sky, Caleb stopped. "Nora Ashford," he said, his voice rough. "I'm not a man for fancy words, but I know what I want, and I want you." Her heart stopped. He went on. "Not because my girls chose you, not because you fit on this ranch, because you're the strongest, kindest, most stubborn woman I've ever known, and I don't want to spend another day without you." Then he went down on one knee. The twins gasped. "Will you marry me?" Tears streamed freely down Nora's face. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, steadier. "Yes, I will." He stood and pulled her into his arms. The twins flung themselves around them both, laughing and crying at once. From the church doorway, the townspeople watched. Some smiled, some whispered, some turned away. But Nora didn't care. For the first time in her life, she was not too much. She was enough, and she was home. And so Nora Ashford found what she had been searching for all her life. Not just a roof over her head, but a family that chose her. Not in spite of who she was, but because of it. The town's whispers faded into silence. Shame melted away like morning mist, and in its place rose something stronger, something unshakable. Because sometimes the people who see our worth are the ones we least expect, and sometimes the smallest voices speak the greatest truth. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing in these women, and for reminding us all that worth is not something that has to be earned. It simply is. Subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.